Hi and welcome to the Unquendor Guitars workshop. My name is Daniel and in this episode I'm going to make some clamping cauls to help prevent damaging your workpiece when using big clamps. When using clamps to hold down your workpiece or glue two parts together, there's always a slight chance of the clamp leaving a mark on your nice piece of wood, and that's something I always try to avoid by using a bit of scrap wood in between my workpiece and my clamp. And to even better protect the guitar body usually I'm working on, I often add a layer of foam even in between the scrap piece of wood and the piece I'm working on. And instead of having two separate pieces, I thought, why not make a permanent solution? So in this episode I'm going to make some permanent clamping cauls to help me hold down my workpiece and protect it from the clamp. For this project we only need a few basic materials. It's a piece of plywood, some scrap or a piece of MDF, some foam rubber or a sheet of cork or leather, and some spray adhesive. First thing I'm going to do is mark the clamping cauls I want to make, and this is just a 15mm thick piece of plywood, about 30 centimeters long and 20 centimeters wide, but it doesn't really matter. You can choose the sizes of the clamping cauls you need yourself. I know I want at least one clamping caul to help me when gluing on the headstock veneer, so I want a clamping caul that's big enough for my headstock. And I'm going to go with 90mm, the entire width of the board. And this is a bit awkward. And I'm going to make a couple of smaller ones as well. So I divided my board in a couple of pieces I'm going to use as clamping cauls, but of course you can make them however you want. Unfortunately I don't have a table saw to cut a bunch of strips of wood to make my clamping caul, so I'm going to use my track saw or my miter saw. But yeah, of course if you have a table saw, use your table saw. Or any other saw for that matter. With all the pieces cut, I'm now going to use my router table and a small round over bit to round off all the edges from my future clamping cauls. And if you don't have a router table or a small round over bit, of course you can just use a sanding block and some sandpaper or rasp or files to knock off these sharp edges. After rounding over the edges, I'm going to take a 120 grit sandpaper and just lightly sand the entire clamping caul and just knock off the remaining edges. Now with the clamping cauls nicely sanded, it's time to apply the backing material. I'm going to apply it to both the back and all four sides of my clamping cauls. So I'm going to place my piece of wood on the backing material and leave an edge equal to the thickness of my material along all the edges. In my case it's 15 millimeters. And I'm going to mark it on the other side as well. And I'm going to cut this out. Mark the 15 millimeter again. I hope this shows up on camera, but I've marked all the corners with a 15 by 15 millimeter square. And I need to cut these corners from the material. And now I can place my clamping caul in the center and fold over the edges. Time to apply some spray adhesive to the backing material, just a regular spray adhesive. Most spray adhesives need to flash off for a moment, so I leave it for a couple of minutes before I apply it to the clamping caul. And with the spray adhesive now set just a little, it's very sticky, it's time to apply the clamping caul. Try and position it as best as you can. Press it down and fold over the edges. I really like to make sure the corners are nice and tucked in. And now let it sit for a couple of minutes before I trim the excess sticking out from the top of my clamping caul. Now with the glue set, it's time to trim off the excess sticking out from the clamping caul, just using a scalpel blade. And very gently try to trim off the excess. And if you want to get real fancy, you can take a 320 grit sandpaper and sand the edges. This is just to tidy it up a bit. One nice clamping caul. The clamping cauls are ready, and they do not only provide protection for your workpiece from your clamp, they also add additional friction and help to spread the pressure from your clamp more evenly. So they also help to keep your workpiece nice and secure to your workbench. And just like that, I have a nice set of clamping cauls which are going to be very useful for my next guitar build. Not only to protect the wood from the clamps, but I can already see several other uses for these clamping cauls. For example, I'm sure they do great as a sanding block as well. Maybe use them as bench cookies, who knows. I'm sure I can come up with several other good reasons to use these clamping cauls. If you think this is a good idea, or you're going to try to make these yourself, yeah, let me know in the comment section down below. I always like to read when you guys are trying my methods or using my methods at home with good success. So yeah, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you like this video, of course, while you're down there, please consider leaving a like. And if you're new to my channel and you've liked what you've seen, please consider subscribing so you get notified when I upload something new and you don't have to miss out on any of my future uploads. With that said, this is it for this week's video. I hope to see you all in the next one, but until then, have a nice week.